Hi everyone, it's Dave from Doctors of Running, and today we're going to be doing a video that I'm very excited for. We're going to be talking about the new ASICS Metaspeed Sky Tokyo and the ASICS Metaspeed Edge Tokyo. Now these are two of the new super shoes releasing from ASICS, and this video will not include the ASICS Metaspeed Ray. We did have some initial impressions when we were over in Tokyo, but I do not have my official seating pairs at this time. So we are going to focus mainly on these two models today. When we look at the ASICS Metaspeed Sky and the Edge specification-wise, they are exactly the same. So they both have 39.5 millimeters of stack in the heel, 34.5 millimeters of stack in the forefoot. That is a 5 millimeter drop platform. And they both now feature the new midsole, which is going to be an ATPU-based midsole called Flight Foam Leap. This midsole is much softer, much more compliant, and a lot more bouncy than the predecessor of Flight Foam Turbo Plus. So I want to get into the differences a little bit of these shoes before we get going. When we look at the basic configuration of the shoe, now I'm holding up the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Tokyo. One of the things you'll notice right away is the outsole difference, and the colors are different just like they were in the previous model. So easy way to tell them apart there. There is a slight differentiation on where people land and a little bit of weight considerations based on the rubber placement. I don't know how much of that you actually feel when you're running. They still feel pretty similar to me from an outsole grip standpoint. But one of the big things that is different here is the placement of that new midsole. So Flight Foam Leap, in the Metaspeed Sky, it is going to be below the plate. And when we look at the plate's actually a little bit of a flatter design inside of the Metaspeed Sky than its respective counterpart, the Edge. And this is what they designed mainly for the stride runners, quote unquote. And those are the people that increase their stride length as they pick up the pace. Tend to have a little bit more of a higher heel lift, and so you'll kind of notice more of a lopey stride. Those people tend to be a little bit more gravitated forward in the midfoot and the forefoot. This is mainly going off of the press conference that they did. Whether or not those runners actually do end up gravitating towards this shoe, I think there's going to be a lot of individual components that would make that decision. But when we look at it, because the plate sits pretty high up and the Flight Foam Leap is below, you have a lot of Flight Foam Leap in the heel. So this is a very, very soft heel. Now, one of the big changes they made to both of these models is that they did widen the heel platform and added a lot of sole flaring to the back of them. I do have the old Metaspeed Edge Paris model right here. And if we put these two side to side, you can see that there's a lot more structure built out on the heel of both of these models respectively. So they really wanted to focus on rear foot stability in both of these models, but one is going to lean more towards the people that need rear foot stability, and one is kind of just stabilizing the foam a little bit more. And you could probably guess the one that's just kind of stabilizing the foam a little bit more is the Metaspeed Sky, because there's just a lot more of it underneath. So the way this shoe feels, the rocker geometry is still pretty similar, but because this new foam is so soft and so bouncy, like, you really feel like a trampoline coming off of that heel. And I think one thing that is worth noting when we look at the heel and my landing profiles, I'll put it pretty close to the camera there, but you can see I have quite a bit of compression on the inside of the shoe there. And when I land, it really just compresses down there. So it can be a little bit unstable in the heel for those that need heel stability. I think the widening of the platform is good because it does resist a little bit of motion in both directions, but it kind of just stabilizes it just enough to not be unstable. And so when we look at the Metaspeed Edge Tokyo, this one has Flight Foam Turbo Plus below the plate and the spooned out plate design. So you're going to see a lot more of that Flight Foam Leap in the forefoot and a lot more of that Turbo Plus in the heel. So this has a much more structured heel because you have the same width, and that Turbo Plus is just a little bit more resilient and not as compliant, so it's kind of a firmer heel there. Both these shoes have plenty of cushion for the distances that they run respectively. I do find that in the Sky, going back to it, I find that I have to load that midfoot and forefoot pretty hard to really engage the plate the way that I want to. So I think this is probably going to be more of a 10K and down shoe for me. I think it could go half marathon and up pretty easily for the right person. I just think I get a little bit tired and I start crashing into that heel a little bit more, and then that's when my form starts to go a little bit wonky. So I think I just need a little bit more structure in the heel. So for me personally, by the end of this video, you'll probably get the Edge is probably the one for me, but this is a really fun ride. You got to get that like trampoline kind of catapulting off of the heel and midfoot. And then that forefoot though it's a stiff and it's a very kind of structured feeling in the forefoot in the sky. And so you have this bouncy, soft, compliant heel, and that transitions into kind of a firmer, kind of rolling forefoot there, a little bit more of a structured. So not quite as bouncy in the forefoot for me, but that doesn't really need to be because you're just exploding off of that heel and midfoot. So it kind of reminds me a little bit of the Alphafly 1 in that regards, but they are still different shoes. And I didn't go into the weight earlier. With specifications, I mean, these shoes are super light. They're 170 grams. So 170 grams, 5.9 ounces, men's size 9. So these are some of the lightest shoes on the market so far. So when we go into the ride for the Edge Tokyo, so you kind of guessed it, more structured heel, but now you have a really bouncy and plush forefoot. So the way that this shoe is oriented with that spooned plate, you get that kind of nice structured heel, and then you almost like drop into that forefoot. So it feels like you're kind of falling forward a little bit. And because that foam is so compliant, you really smash that forefoot, and I feel like it gives you a good explosion off of the forefoot. So it really depends on the type of experience you're looking for. I think if you're kind of a little bit further back on your heel and you want a little bit more structure, you're going to get that from the Turbo Plus midsole here, and then you're going to get a really lively and bouncy toe off through the forefoot. In the Sky, you're going to get all that bounce in the rear foot through the midfoot with a little bit of a firmer based forefoot. And both are incredibly responsive. I mean, you could easily take both of these shoes 5K to marathon. It's going to just be whatever fits your mechanics best. And I think for me, on my mechanics, I get a little sloppy in my heel when I get tired. So I just need a little bit more structure there. So if I'm choosing between the two, even for 5K, I think I'm going to go Edge Tokyo, and I'm pretty much going to take that all the way up to marathon across the board for me. So I think the Edge Tokyo is going to be the shoe for me. But both these shoes are very nice, very light, very responsive. Like, these are going to be two of the top shelf options this year for the racing category, and two shoes that I'm very excited for. I do think the outsole traction is good. I didn't have any issues with slipping on either of these models. I feel like turning was pretty good in both of these models. The only one that I had a little bit of issues with turning, and again, it's probably my own mechanics, the way I land into that rear foot, is the Metaspeed Sky Tokyo. In sharper turns, I just had a little bit more give, kind of going medially and laterally, and I just kind of felt a little squirrely on the sharper turns, whereas I felt a little bit more secure on the Edge Tokyo, but both were good, and for normal turns, they were both totally fine. We're talking sharp turns here, and at pace, so we're going pretty quick on these things. At easy paces, I think I do like the Edge a little bit better. I think that structured heel just works with my mechanics. I can kind of get into a little bit more of a shuffle and go fast with it. Whereas I feel like I'm kind of floating a little bit more in the Sky. It just feels very soft and marshmallowy. So if that's the feeling you're going for, you got it right here. Upper-wise, going into the fit, I think they both fit pretty well. It's a relatively performance fit. They're both super shoes. So they're pretty much geared at being lightweight, lock down the foot really well, and then kind of be a no-nonsense upper. So that's kind of what you get. You get a translucent mesh here, very lightweight on foot, very thin, lightweight tongue. It's not gusseted. It does move around a tiny bit, but once you get the laces down, then it holds its shape really well and it doesn't go anywhere. So it's just a little bit tricky getting that tongue to sit exactly the way that you want it, but other than that, it's pretty good. There is a heel counter in both these models, but it's a little bit more linear down the calcaneus. You don't really have much along the medial and lateral aspect of the heel. So if you're sensitive to pressure on the sides of the heel, you don't got to worry about that here. But something to consider, you got a little counter there on the very back side, but there is kind of a retrocalcaneal curve there to kind of take some pressure off of that. So I'm pretty happy with the fit. When we look at the width, heel in the midfoot, heel's a little bit narrow, but not so narrow that it encroaches on that area, especially since it doesn't have that counter on the medial and lateral aspect. It doesn't feel like it's putting pressure on you. So I think it feels pretty good. The material itself holds itself well, so I didn't really notice any major foot translation. Midfoot's probably normal width. Forefoot, just a little normal width to slightly wide. I wouldn't call it wide, but it's just got a little bit more space. However, the forefoot has a little bit more volume than the previous versions as well, so there is a little bit more space for foot swelling, which is great. I think that'll be good, especially with the longer distances. And those two uppers and lasts, they are very similar in fit across the board, so I think you can kind of take both of those similarly across the Sky and the Edge models. But this was a very fun experience to run in both these shoes. Very lightweight, very responsive, and we saw amazing times coming out of all the ASICS athletes at the ASICS Tokyo Speed Race. So they're both winners. I think they're both really solid options. For me personally, I'm going to go Edge Tokyo. Probably not a surprise. I was Edge Paris and I was Edge Plus before that. So I think I'm just an Edge boy. But both these shoes are awesome. Those are our thoughts on the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Tokyo and ASICS Metaspeed Edge Tokyo.